the building inspector is unable to determine a particular use relates to the tables, the planning board shall recommend to the building inspector a reasonable number. Okay, it's there.
Yeah.
So that's where,
She's now changing that.
now changing that a little bit.
To
But
say,
what I don't understand, Maggie, and it's because you're getting very technical on me,
yeah.
is this inclusion about the 85th percentile peak parking rate. I have no idea what that means.
Okay, and
and
maybe, so maybe you don't want to use that wording, and maybe you just want to say the ITE parking generation manual for that land use, and not
The most recent edition.
the most
The
recent
most recent
edition.
edition of the, yeah, that I understand.
And
I
that's,
think what Maggie wants to give is clarity and make it more black and white as to what it is, rather than saying who all, some people might determine it by the building inspector or the planning board. It just wants to be apples and apples with, with clarity of what it is that we're looking for. Is that what you're trying to do, Maggie?
And then separately from that, removing the place and the role of the planning board, that in the event it's not an analogous use in the ITE then recent parking generation manual, the determination shall be made by the building inspector and not by the planning board, which is different.
Is that what you're saying, Maggie?
okay, so let me just go over it. So the first case is any use that's permitted by the zoning bylaw. Currently, the building inspector says it's the closest use. So a childcare center, some people say, oh, a school, that's the closest use. So we'll apply that standard.
Right.
Other people say that's not the closest use, we'll apply some letter from 1994. So instead of having that kind of unclear thing, if the use is permitted by the zoning bylaw, it's not in the table, you look at the ITE, most recent edition of the ITE for that land use. And that's
So
what
you're
the
not telling
standard is.
so you're taking out the language that says the building inspector looks for a similar use. You want to
Right.
take that
Yes.
language out?
Right, and then,
in here.
Yes, yeah.
Unless the proposed use is not included.
not in the ITE manual, then the building inspector has to say, well, it comes closest to this, so we use the standard for this.
Well, I mean, it does say here that the required parking shall be that of the closest zone use as shall be determined by the building inspector. So it's not.
If it's not included in the ITE
It's removing a process through the planning board, and it's giving sole administrative function.
Right, it becomes an administrative function, that's a good terminology. It becomes an administrative function of what does the ITE manual, most recent editions say, versus a process.
I'm actually not
of-
convinced that by doing it administratively and quietly, that necessarily leads to a more transparent process. I understand the intent.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you necessarily, you may, but I don't think it's beneficial to remove the process through the planning board for that. If you're dealing with a scenario like you're implying, that it's a larger scale development, it's not just a scenario where it's
But the
a
planning board
dentist
will
moving into.
discuss it if it's a
No,
larger
no.
scale, because it's one of the site
If it's-
plan review.
Correct, that's
Criteria.
separate. This process right now allows for the planning board in this instance to determine it in a process that is open and
How do you
public and
determine it?
noticed.
No, it isn't.
Well, it's
open and
not,
public
it may,
or not.
it's.
Building
the-
inspector calls you up and says, actually calls Lee Newman and says, I've got a daycare. I don't know what should I use for a parking standard? I'm not sure what the similar use.
No, that's really not the history on this. What happened was a date long before we got to 1688, there was a daycare proposal and the building inspector did not know how to classify it.
Yes.
So the building inspector asked the planning board how the use should be classified and
Yes.
what should be the appropriate standard.
I want to pause on that.
Now,
for
wait a second, let me finish.
Wait.
And the planning board went to the town engineer and asked for an opinion as to what the standard should be. And the
Yes.
town engineer produced the memo that we rely on now for daycare facilities. This came back to a planning board meeting And it was reviewed at a planning board meeting, and the planning board accepted that standard for daycare facilities. And so then whenever a daycare facility came in thereafter, that was the standard that was applied. So there was a public process around it.
Exactly.
It was around an identification of a use that didn't fit into the table, and research and a question asked, and a planning board voting and doing the research and determining what the standard would be.
Okay, and what resulted was that standard that was 1996, that process happened, and that got stuck, right? Because
And an outmoded
subsequent
manual.
years, it got outdated, but it's still being applied to this day by the planning board. Whereas under this change, the standard would grow along with the research and knowledge and.
Again, I understand the intent and the reason, the underlying reason to make the change.
Yep.
I agree that, it's not a harm, it's a benefit to be more clear.
Yes.
And that's true with the citing the most updated source material for ITV as amended. So we're future-proofing that provision.
Yep.
But I don't think it's in the cause of public awareness or supports the goal of transparency to make it solely under the jurisdiction of an administrative function. I think that where a building inspector is in doubt, and as you said in your email, the thing gets updated. Oh, wait, a use that has not been discussed before is now in the manual for exactly that reason. If there is that future use that's challenging for the building inspector or commissioner to resolve, that we have a public process like Lee's talking about.
Sure.
That is restored or maintained so that the building commissioner can seek out, the then town engineer for their guidance, and that the board has an opportunity in front of the public,
Speak about it.
to determine if that's, a reasonable standard, and depending on the chair and the chair's prerogative, and then at that night, to invite a resident up to discuss the impact of that standard versus another standard. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, and that's a very small change, just to say, to be determined by the planning board as opposed to by the building inspector.
What if
Okay.
all that we did was took out the ITE Parking Generation Manual Second Edition and substituted the ITE Parking General Manual as most recently published?
Or an alternative technical source determined by the planning board to be equally more applicable.
Why would you keep in the alternative technical source? That just.
Because because we don't want to restrict ourselves solely to that source. If there is a separate, like there is multiple standards for energy efficiency. It's not just the lead standard, right? There may be other standards that we want to pursue depending on the impacts of a particular use. Lee, it sounded like you were going to chime in there.
I was also going to say, Maggie, when it came to the daycare facilities, it wasn't covered in the ITE Parking Generation Manual at the time, which is why we relied on a memorandum.
Right, and that was the right thing to do in 1996.
But that's the reason to have an alternative source, because everything might not be covered in the ITE Parking Generation Manual.
That's right.
Right, and that's what okay. I hear you, and if you are only willing to take out the second edition and replace it with the most recent edition.
It's not a question of what
you know.
we're just throwing things out there right now for discussion, Maggie.
Yeah,
Just trying to, because.
sure, talk it out. That's
you
the
know,
way.
You want us to get to Maytown meeting, which I think is an admirable thing for you to want us to do. And so I'm trying to get us there.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense, and I think.
But I understand what Adam is saying, because if we're just limited to that manual, then it's just, actually the building commissioner doesn't even need us. We can just refer him to say, instead of the building commissioner going to the closest similar use, we can have the building commissioner looking at the ITE parking generation manual as most recently published.
Yes, yeah.
And or
And if not covered there, so that's an administrative thing, and Adam is saying that's not a good thing to do for transparency.
I think, I mean, I understand what you're getting at.
Just out of curiosity, when you went to the ITE parking generation manual, how many parking spaces did you come up with for 1688?
It was in the letter that she.
I
emailed us.
attached it. I don't know if Paul got it because that was a communication between you and I.
I don't know.
But I don't have Wi-Fi here. I don't know. In 1688, I submitted
What, was it more than 30?
it was more than what was put in the decision.
Substantially more? Because we were at around 30. We were
I think
between
it was
25 and 30
37.
spaces.
I think
37.
it was 37. And in the engineer's report, he said, the ITE standard is 37, but we don't think we need that here because blah, 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 blah. But no waiver was granted. It just, you guys went with the 1994 letter.
Right.
So in Maggie's email to me and to Alex and Lee, she relating to that requires 38 parking spaces.
38.
And if the
Substantially more.
and if the barn is kept for the daycare, 55 parking spaces. But I want to be very careful because I don't think we can talk about anything related to 1688 any further than we already have because of existing litigation.
I just
For
want
the
to get a
purposes
sense
of an
of
example.
the difference between the ITE, which now covers daycare centers, and the process that we used before. I know we're not discussing 1688. I'm discussing the use of the ITE manual and where that would lead us using this as
I understand.
as an example.
Here's what I would propose. Given your interest in, which I share, in continually improving the public function of government, why don't you and I, if you're open to it, have an offline conversation, come up with something that can work, and then I can communicate that to Lee, and I can't guarantee whether, because we also should really have input from the building commissioner and from our town engineering firm and or the outside firms, because you're adding multiple elements to the thing, which is fine, but it adds a little more complexity. And I will absolutely commit to moving in the most expeditious way. It's possible that we will need to get, we may miss the annual, we may perhaps have to do it either for a special, or if we're still going to need a little more time to exact, for instance, a percentile. And I understand the 85th percentile. We were dealing with other applications before the board. I was curious what the standard typically was. We had, in fact, Lee, Rebecca from GPI, I can't remember the specific application, speak to certain percentiles under certain circumstances. And there may be an 85th, I think was a common number. I'm not surprised, that you saw that. I saw it online in a bunch of forums myself. But having said that, I think one of the which you may have forwarded as a link. I support trying to make an improvement here. I want to make sure that we have the facility to do it properly and thoughtfully, regardless of the other parking that we're going to be dealing with in the center of town and in the Heights. And I don't know if that's going to be in October. I'm hoping it won't be. I'm hoping we can do it. If we can't get it for a tight timeline in the annual, maybe we can do it for a special, but we've got at least to consult with 3 or 4 other people. So you and I will chat this week. I'm going to communicate to Lee this week. We know that we can't get to the town engineer this week. That will be next week. Well,
Traffic.
engineer, right,
There's a
inside Tom's office. That's why I said someone in Tom's office. If we can get comment before that, that's great. I don't know the administrative process, if Tom is the head of the department, also has a question for that though. But I will take those action steps. And then, and we'll continue to maintain, our conversation through the week and come up with some kind of a plan. So, and then I'll report back at our next meeting, where we're at. I do intend for the board, we'll come to that in our agenda presently, to have another meeting before our next scheduled meeting so we can resolve these 2 issues. Because our next meeting, I think, is 3 weeks away, and we've got to stick on our timeline. So are you okay with that approach?
That sounds like a great approach. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I appreciate the
Okay.
effort that you guys
Thanks
put
for bringing
in.
it up, and thanks for continuing to keep an eye on us and, and the town. So this brings us to item 4 on our agenda, review and approval of the affordable housing plan. Given the hour, I would like at this time a motion to approve the affordable housing plan.
So moved.
I have
Second.
a motion
Second.
from Paul. I have a second from Artie. Any discussion at this
I
time?
just want to say, it's clear that this took an incredible amount of work,
It did, Tom. Paul. It
an
certainly
incredible
did.
amount of work.
And
It was-
from a lot of people. I mean,
Oh,
your
yes.
leadership,
Artie here worked very hard. Natasha and I as co-clerks.
Oscar,
Yep.
yes,
Oscar, and-
Natasha, Karen,
yeah, but Oscar and Jean did a big
course.
chunk of work.
Full
the
job.
department. This is this is,
Extremely comprehensive.
among the most complicated reform and most fundamental reform to our zoning bylaw to participate in a good, again, that's greater than any of us individually. And I'm looking forward to being able to take action on it. But so
Thank you very much,
I
Adam.
mean that sincerely, Natasha, I'm looking at you, but you may not be able to see me. So thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
So now we have a motion, a second, we've had discussion. I'll take a vote. Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Artie Crocker,
Aye.
Natasha Spada,
Aye.
Jean McKnight.
Aye,
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much.
thank you.
So next on our agenda is the review of the action plan for the MBTA Communities Law implementation. And you had sketched, I think it was a 2-page document.
Oh, don't
I have it here.
understand that.
It was at the very end
Ah,
of the housing report.
oh.
And then there are dates. I can't remember what page this was of the housing report.
It's not in the.
It's not in, you're right. It's just, it immediately followed it.
It's just it's a memo that we put together. Steps.
I think it's page 198.
That's impressive. Thank you.
Oh, no, the housing.
98
plan-
of the,
Oh, the housing plan was 198 pages. I don't know what page it is in the.
Oh,
Oh,
you
it's
gotta add.
gonna be, it's 266.
There you go.
266.
That makes
Okay,
more
great.
sense.
Here we go, 266.
So what do we need to, at this hour, what action steps do we need to take on this?
I wanted to, these are the components that are required for the town to answer for its action plan submittal, which is due, I think, the end of January. I think out of this, the most important piece of it is basically the timeline that we've kind of laid out in terms of how we're going to get to the end result of town meeting in 2024, and when we anticipate conducting these various components. I had met with Katie King, the assistant town manager, and Karen Sonneborg, and we tried to sketch out what we thought was a plan moving forward that would move us toward the goal of actually crafting the zoning to be presented to town meeting in May of 2024. Followed by I think the town meeting, a backup of town meeting in October in the event that there was some carryover from the May town meeting. And then basically the submittal of the zoning and approval to meet the December 31st, 2024 deadline.
So one thing that I noticed is that it talks about in March and April of the planning board's initial proposal. That's March or April of this year. And that we would conduct the first, the first community workshop to present that proposal in March.
Or April, probably more like April.
Right, but that means we're going to need separate planning board meetings that need to be scheduled in the next 8 weeks in order for us to actually devise the board's initial proposal. So we don't have that schedule, but that may be a micro thing, and we can, it's just something that to think about. I think this can we really get the fiscal impact analysis by June with all of the district changes? And we also need additional impacts. We need an impact analysis, not just for the fiscal impact, but also for other town departments. There will be an impact in schools. There will be an impact in, Artie, I think I need those.
No, I didn't need those.
Well, the fiscal impact will cover schools.
It will cover schools? I don't know that. What about public safety, Department of Public Works, health, recreation, and other engineering?
Well,
the fiscal analysis will include all that?
Well, the fiscal impact analysis is generally looking at the fiscal, the
Yes.
revenue stream that you're going to get as a function of this development, and then what its associated costs are. And so it's generally doing based upon your projected build out over a certain timeline. It's telling you what the projected revenue would be from tax revenue.
To the town.
Yeah, and then what the public service costs are associated with that, and then what any school related cost relative to that might be, and then basically a net value.
So for instance, if it costs $18,000 or $19,000 or $20,000 a year now to send one child to school in public school, that's accounted for in the fiscal impact analysis, right?
It's looking at projected school age children, I would imagine, that would be living in this development based upon historical practice in Needham, and it's including that. I mean, when we did the fiscal impact analysis on the Muzzy site, I think one of the things we did look at was if we had the housing piece of it, what would that look like fiscally? So,
right, I remember that, but I don't remember if it also included user fees. Like for instance, if in 1,800 units of housing, you get 240 more people going to the pool, does that, does that generate an additional service fee for the town? Does that generate, and does that generate 100 more calls to public safety? And is that calculated into the fiscal model? And what's the impact? You're saying it's going to include some kind of a model we expect of 1,800 units at full build out, that we'd have 500 students, right?
All I'm saying is that the fiscal impact studies that we have done in the past, the one we did on the Muzzy site, included, there was a strategy that was calculated. I don't remember what the methodology was, which lets you basically assign what the cost would be to the community just based on its historic practice for comparable uses. And then it was assigned to your build out on a square footage basis. And then there was, on the school side, I think there were comparable developments that were looked at to come up with a number of children that were
Okay.
being generated in those units.
So let me-
It was all embedded into the fiscal impact study.
Let me just do this, given the hour. I'll have a conversation, I guess, with you and, to chat through about an impact analysis. I think, we obviously will need a fiscal impact analysis. I think I understand what you're saying. I recall that it was, that the fiscal impact analysis for the then, I guess, rezoning of Muzzy for Highway Commercial 1, it did include some fees and so on, and I think there was a calculation of how many students it would potentially generate at peak, into the school system.
And-
for this, I think we may need a higher level of analysis. Natasha?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that I ran with Carol Fischetti and Michael O'Brien. So she's from FinCom, as you know,
Yeah.
and Michael O'Brien's
In the
with the
school.
schools. We were the capacity subgroup, and we talked about all of this, and we discussed and it's in the report, discuss the items that we need to check every time there is a new development. And what we determined is that the only thing that we could determine is based on ADUs, possibly, because they're so, it's so small, that it wouldn't make much of an impact, but that everything else would have to be project by project. So I think what we're trying to get is like that we're going to review all of this, and that each project will be individual to review for capacity for the town, which is really important, which is what you're saying. But that we couldn't determine what the impacts were going to be until we have a project in front of us.
Well, it's not quite true with Highway Commercial 1, right? With Highway Commercial 1, we didn't have a specific development at the time, and we used certain modeling to determine the fiscal impact analysis that Lee is talking about, making certain assumptions that would impact students and schools and
Right,
all
but
that.
that was one project, right? Then you did it based on that one project.
No, we did it based on general zoning.
But the zoning was only 2 sites.
Yeah, I think what Josh is
So-
saying is true.
So I understand what you're saying, that as we undertake specific developments, we'll be able to do a more specific impact analysis. If you have a house that's 30, if you have a residential building that's 34 units of senior housing, that impact is going to have a different impact analysis than
Correct.
if you have 600 units on 2 or 3 buildings.
And we can't determine that at this moment. It's based on, project by project. And just to let you know, the school department, they're doing a whole master plan right now, just so that they can tell, so that when there is a project and it says we anticipate this amount, we can then determine the more recent, capacity of the schools. But we couldn't determine it as an overall.
I think given
I-
the hour, I'd like to actually put a pin in this discussion about the impacts for now. My point is we have to do it. if we can do it for June of 2023 in a couple of months, that's great. And we'll chat that through in detail offline. I don't want to take any more time tonight. But I do see this plan. Jean, did you have a specific comment, not about impact, but about the action plan?
No, I just was going to make a quick comment about impact, but I'll wait on that.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to fully, review this and understand what's involved at each step. I think this is a very good overall overview of what we need to get to. And we'll, I'm drilling into the detail and, what I think we're going to need, in particular for passage at town meeting in May 2024. We still have a good amount of time. We do have in the summer of 2023, the build out of the plan. I have some thoughts on it, Natasha, as you were on the capacity subcommittee. I'll chat with you about that offline, but does anyone else have any other comments about the action plan components or the timeline? Okay, so we'll continue. We're going to continue to to go over this because we've got a lot of work to do between now and May.
It's
Thank you for
possible that
doing this.
some of these dates are going to slide.
Yes.
But the state is expecting us to submit to respond to their questions by the end of January. And this is the framework that I'm planning to use to do that response. So I just want to make sure that you don't see any significant issues with it in my moving forward along those lines.
Good. Thank you very much. So next comes the minutes.
We have 4 sets of minutes.
We do.
Some of them do have questions.
Yes,
Shall
they
I
do.
start just going through them with the
So-
October 13th?
So October 13, there was one comment. It was on page 3. I mean, in addition to your red lines, you asked a question about what the 1900 referred to, and I think we should just remove. It's confusing. The ADU size limit is 850 square feet.
Yeah.
If you have a 1900 square foot rental, was just an example that Paul used.
Oh, if you have so should you say if you have an 850 square foot
No,
rent
I'm saying if you have a 1900 square foot rental,
and have a couple that,
except, and just.
yeah,
that's
what are
it.
you proposing to leave out, please, Adam?
The question mark after 1900, the parentheses in front of 1900, the ADU
Oh.
size limit is 850 square feet.
Right.
Just this.
So, leave it as it was. If you
Yes.
have a 1900 square foot rental.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, I see. And so in a way, it was comparing with.
Yes.
Yes, I see. Okay,
Okay.
excellent. We're all
So
set with that
that's-
then.
That's that. I think the next one I had is on October 18th, on page 1. Paul, you were talking about medical marijuana, and then made a comment also in section 1.3 on page 4, which I think,
I mean, maybe there's no way to know without actually looking up a
therefore,
lot of stuff what
add
this
medical in
means.
section. I would strike also in section 1.3 on page 4, and all the way where it says
Leave page 1
unclear.
alone and strike,
I would strike it. I would strike also in section 1.3 on page 4, and therefore add medical in section 3.2 on page 5.
so, okay. We're on the 18th,
October 18,
page
page
4.
1. No, page 1, page 1.
page 1. Oh, okay. Also, where?
Also, it said the second sentence begins, also in section 1.3 on page 4, just before the yellow.
Oh, also, strike also?
Yes, strike the whole sentence.
Strike the whole sentence?
Yes.
Add medical and medical. All right, unclear. The sentence that is unclear is struck.
Move on.
All right.
Next on page 2, also, where the marijuana products are purchased from, it could be a permanent change. Yeah, that was
That was the idea.
Yeah,
So we just
so-
say yes, yes, reword it that way.
yeah, as
Okay,
a sentence, not as a question.
right.
Um,
Permanent change, right.
she would move the,
So then, she would move the 4th to section 3.2. It's just unclear. And then the word permanently was in there.
Ms. McKnight agrees with Mr. Alpert. She would move the 4th, but we don't know what reference that's to. Where things are being allowed permanently. To section 3.2, where things are being allowed permanently. I think section 3.2 was a reference to the decision. This is all relating to the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we don't know, can't
I
identify,
don't know what the fourth refers to.
yeah, without,
Strike the sentence. I don't think it's.
strike the
fine,
sentence. No,
fine. Thank you, good.
important.
Let's go with that.
Okay,
And then we're on page 4 of October 18th. I would
yeah,
keep in, already made the point, and I would strike out yours in red.
all right, so just leave the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Board should discuss, all right, leave it in, okay.
And then I think that takes us to October 24.
Yes, it
There was
does.
the one question in the paragraph after that. She highlighted.
Oh,
hearing.
the hearing meeting, I think that should be,
Is that- Oh, the hearing, after discussion, yeah,
yes, you're right, Alex. I think that was a meeting.
open and keep, because it wasn't,
Meeting, not hearing.
it wasn't a hearing, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Not a
Thank
hearing,
you.
That's a meeting, that was a meeting before town meeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Alex. It's helpful. And
Thank you.
then
Now, October 24th.
on page 2, and there's a question about which board, Jean, you were referring to.
Yeah, the timing, let's see, the timing is difficult as the owners are looking to sell. Oh, no, let me remind myself of what we're talking about.
And also present,
Land for the town. Oh,
I
this
think
is
that's
about
right.
this,
Yeah, this is about
It
Charles
is.
River Street.
Charles
yes,
River
it
Street.
is the Foster property. That's right.
the timing is difficult, the owners are looking to sell. I think I was referring to the select
I
board.
think it's a select board.
Yeah, because the planning
Well,
board
that's
really
not
is
us.
not involved in this
No,
process.
No, that's
But
not us.
the sentence
Board
doesn't make
is just
sense.
too vague, but it is, I think,
Regardless of the
I
board,
was referring to the select board.
although let's assume you're correct, the select board will not know what the percentage is that
That
D-
DOCD
yeah,
would require that, and I think it's clear from the context that it's a percentage of affordable units.
I think the last one I don't have, I didn't bring with me was November 1, but I don't think November 1 had any,
Let me
think
look,
we just
let me
approve
look,
it as
the
amended.
last one may have not have
We
had.
need separate motions, or can I make a motion to approve all?
I love anonymous.
I love that.
11th, the 11th,
Ornaments?
there was
No.
one little thing on the 11th, if you don't mind,
Hey,
page 5.
omnibus. I was
page
missing a
5.
syllable or two.
What is truly special about this, it is allows, we're talking about Highland Science. What is truly special about this is it allows them to go to a 1.25 FAR.
Oh, or
But they were
1
only going to a 1.21.
That was a comment, a question that I already had.
Now, I may have misspoke, but do you want that misspeaking to?
Where is
Right
this
here.
now we're talking about right
On
there?
the third, on page 3, Mr. Crocker stated,
What is,
then near the end, what is truly special about this that allows them to go to a 1.25 FAR?
It might have been, they may not have gone to 1.21 yet.
Well, I mean, certainly it was 1.25, then they shifted a little bit of building and it went down to 1.21.
All right, let's leave it at
Either
1.25.
way, I don't
Leave
think
it at
doesn't
1.25.
matter.
Leave it at
Okay,
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
awesome.
So,
I move we accept all 4 sets of minutes with the red line changes and the changes we discussed this evening.
we have a motion, any
Second.
second? Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll come to the vote. Paul Alpert,
Aye.
Artie Crocker, Natasha Spada,
Aye.
Jean McKnight.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We have approved those 4 sets of minutes. Thank you all very much. Lee, do you have,
I'm good. I don't need them. Thank you, Jimmy.
before you get to a report, I'm just going to mention that we've received, I think, 11 emails from the public. Some were supportive and some were opposing, but all related to the proposal that was being discussed at 888 Great Plain Avenue. Then that specific correspondence is in our packet tonight. With that, Lee, do you have a report for us?
You're muted, Lee, you're muted.
So I'm working on the action plan, which is due at the end of January. And I just, but on another matter, I just wanted to call to your attention that I think Northland is planning to do a presentation on their intentions at the Foster property to residents. I think it's scheduled for tomorrow at the Rosemary Complex. And the select board will be.
Lee, it sounds like it's been moved to the 24th.
No, I think there are 2 meetings that are planned. I think there's one, I think the select board were had committed to do a meeting with the neighborhood specifically and to allow Northland to make a presentation of their plans. And that's scheduled, I think it's the select board are hosting it, and that's scheduled for tomorrow. It's an opportunity, I guess, for Northland to present what they're proposing and to hear from the neighbors and answer any questions that they have. And then I think the select board has a presentation from Northland planned on the 24th of January.
Okay. Anything further?
Yeah, could I report one thing?
Yes.
Let me report this to Lee and to all of you, I guess. I observed the MMLA, Massachusetts Municipal Law Association webinar today on the MBTA Communities Act law and the guidelines, and I learned something new. If there is, say, a 10,000 square foot zone lot, or a 7,000 square foot lot in the areas that we propose to rezone, but our zoning requires 20,000 square foot lots. Now, we were really smart, actually, as it turned out, to go along with Matt Borelli's suggestion that in the business areas, we use a 10,000 square foot lot rather than the 20,000 square foot lot. Because if we had stuck with the 20,000 square foot lot, but the lots in the area only had 10,000, 7,000, 12,000, they would be discounted in the analysis that you're going through with the GIS and not counted in the total acreage, in the total number of units.
Good planning. Thanks, Matt.
They consider the idea that you can't build without consolidating the lots to take away from the by right development concept that they're looking for. And that was new to me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Was that new to you?
That's new to me too. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to.
Mr. Chair, just one minor thing. I hate this, hopefully maybe 2 minutes. So Natasha and I, being on the Climate Action
Yes.
Committee, we had just talked briefly. Is there any chance at all of putting, I'll use the word placeholder, for an article going to town meeting to allow carport solar? Any type of placeholder where we can find some language of some towns that have already done it and try to get something in there again as a placeholder so we can at least have the possibility of it being ready for town meeting, enough conversations. And if it isn't, we simply pull it. Is that possible?
I think it's pretty difficult because I think the zoning, I mean, we're
What about for the
talking about
special?
finishing the zoning already by the next meeting by the first meeting in February in the language. Because the process is a long process. It's the time to go to, it has to be referred to the select board, it has to be advertised, it's prescriptive.
Mhm.
I think it's difficult to do that. I think a fall schedule is a more reasonable schedule. I understand your goal, but I don't
What about
think,
the special, Lee?
I can look at the special, but I think it's really tight.
So here's what this is why I wanted to try to get this stuff done before. If we can do the special, that would be, I think that would give us a little more flexibility, but not much.
I'll
Artie,
lay out
Artie,
the
one
timeline
second.
for the special.
Artie and Natasha, how much time will you need to have the language drafted?
Well, I need to, we talked about it in the meeting for the part that I'm working on. I think the group was gonna help me find, and I can send an email out to everyone, help me find already language that is, in nearby towns, if they've already done some of that work, and it's regarding solar on roofs.
So
On
how,
roofs are roofs, excuse me, I misunderstood, on roofs or on parking lots?
In this
Solar
case,
canopies
parking
are-
lot.
I think it's for all, right? So I think, and it's not just that, it's also alternative, like it's geothermal and any other kind of alternative.
But in this case, Natasha, we're referring to just simply carports, or I mean parking lot canopies. Parking lot.
Well, we had two recommendations. Well, it depends on which one we want to go after, but I think
we-
it's, if we can send something to the group and say, can anyone find language from another town to review what it is, to see if it's worth, I
here's
think-
here's where I'm going with this, okay? I'm looking now to call a meeting next Tuesday, the 24th, at 7 p.m. hybrid. And at that meeting, we will resolve the language for the garage,
I can't do
and
that.
the
I-
ADUs.
I can't do that. It's Tuesday. I'm sorry.
Oh, we've got a week.
No, we don't, because I have to do an agenda package. I've got to write it. And I have to get it ready in an agenda package that you want to see on Thursday. That's just not doable. I mean, if we're
I mean,
gonna,
the agenda will only be the two items.
But she's gotta,
No.
she has to post the package.
I have to write, Gene and I have to finalize the language. And then I want John Schneider to take a look at it to make sure we're
For
all,
what it's worth, I'm on vacation next week.
Oh,
I
you
don't
are?
know what, like, if I'm needed for this, I'm not here.
You're out. Peace out. I love it. So my next move was going to be for Thursday, the 26th. Could the 26th or the 27th work?
Alex is out of town.
I know. She'll have to work without Alex on that to prepare.
I mean, are you talking about the evening of the 26th?
The evening of the 26th or 27th?
The evening,
Not
That's not
Friday.
Friday,
I would do
that's a
Friday during
Friday.
the day, or Thursday, the evening of the 26th.
The evening of the
I would say the week of the 30th is what we should be looking at. And Adam, I think I told you I wanted to look at what the select board schedule is. I want to make sure when we set a meeting that we're going to get some advantage out of it. Because we have to vote it, it has to go on their agenda to come back to us for it, and then the hearing gets scheduled.
I understand, I understand that, but we've almost resolved entirely, I think we resolved the garage, and we're almost 100% resolved on ADUs. So let us meet on the 31st. And by the 31st, that also gives you, Natasha, and Artie, we can post on the agenda on the 26th, any potential climate action zoning reform, or climate smart zoning reform. And that gives you guys 2 weeks to get draft wording to us, and for us to look at the schedule for the special. For the, you know, for the
Gives them-
climate action plan.
Gives them a week and 2 days, gives them 8 days, 9 days.
Gives them 2 weeks. One,
No, you're
two.
talking about 2 weeks from tonight, having a
Yeah.
meeting.
Yes.
And they've got to get it done by the Thursday before.
No, we don't need we're not holding a hearing. They can have a draft.
We're having a
language.
meeting.
I
We're having an
know.
open
Oh.
meeting.
I know that.
So they
We can
have to
have a
post the
draft.
agenda
Yes.
and have the package
The
ready by the
26th.
26th.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't give them 2 weeks. It gives them 8 days, 9 days. 8 days, because it's going to be the 18th in 45 minutes.
I mean,
Speaking of which, will somebody give me a ride home? I live near Rosemary Street.
Gene, I'm happy to do it.
All right, thank you, because Steve wants to go to bed. Oh,
Adam, can you and I,
He was the only bright one here.
What's that?
can you and I talk and we can look at the select board schedule and come up with a proposal and distribute it next week or tomorrow to people?
Fine. Can we at least all confirm now while we're present that the 31st at 7 PM works?
Works for me.
31st, let me see.
all right, wait a minute, 31st.
Yeah, I can- I
31st.
can meet then.
Thank you, Artie.
I
Thank you,
will be
Paul.
in Maplewood, New Jersey, taking care of grandchildren, but I will zoom in.
And what about you, Natasha?
I can do the 31st right now.
Okay, so that's our target date for us to finalize our language and hopefully to come up with some language for the other. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll come to the vote. Paul Alpert,
aye.
Artie Crocker, Natasha Spada,
Aye.
Gene McKnight. The chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.